I'm Ravish Raghunanan. I am the Administrative Director of the Caribbean Youth Environment Network, the Trinidad and Tobago chapter. You would have just heard from Michaela. She's our national coordinator. And we have a couple other executive members joining us today as well. A little bit about us and our organization. The Caribbean Youth Environment Network, CYN. We are a non-profit, non-governmental organization, a regional body as well, that focuses its resources on empowering young citizens across the Caribbean and within their communities to develop programs or actions to address various issues in the socio-economic and the environmental space. Some of our programs aim to address issues such as poverty, youth employment, health, climate change, biodiversity, and so on. So there's quite a lot that we do in the climate and the environmental space, and we've been doing it for quite a while. CYN as a regional body has been around since 1993, and we have chapters across many Caribbean islands. Our local chapter, CYN Trinidad and Tobago, we were established in 2001, and we've been working pretty much somewhat consistently through the years to try to really push our agenda and our goals for the youth of Trinidad and Tobago. Why are we all here today? Well, today we're all here for a workshop, LCOI workshop. Take the opportunity to maybe explain that a little bit more. So what is LCOI? Well, from the international perspective, they are what we call conferences of youth, COY, and these typically occur either before or during the United Nations climate change conferences. Some of you may commonly know these as what we call COP, COP, Conference of the Parties. And the intended purpose of these conference of youths is in capacity building, policy training, and preparation for participation in the international COP. At the local level, we refer to it as the LCOI, the Local Conference of Youth, and the focus is on climate change issues that have national importance to the specific country, and the goal really is just for us to be able to discuss these topics, get views and insight from those who are actively involved in these sectors, and get the views and the opinions of the youth involved, and hopefully come up with a couple solutions to the issues that we're facing. This year, for the Trinidad and Tobago Local Conference of Youth, the theme we have chosen is the blue economy. And we've chosen this because it tackles some issues that are pretty dear and near to the youth of Trinidad and Tobago, and everything from the rise of sea levels to oil spills to the lack of economic diversity and a lack, of course, of job opportunities outside some of the more common sectors that we have. We also hope to give a lot of focus to marginalized communities, to amplify their voices at both the national and international levels through our national youth statement. And just generally, we aim to, as mentioned, capture the young people's perspectives about issues related to the blue economy, for example, within marine pollution and overfishing. We also hope to increase the knowledge of the youth involved and create opportunities for both making change and building careers. And finally, we just hope to facilitate further opportunities for youth to network with their peers as well as older professionals in the field. This year we're speaking on the blue economy, and towards that we have 3 workshops. Thank you all for joining us here for the first one, which the topic for today is marine biodiversity and overfishing. And in the coming 2 weeks, we're going to have another online workshop around marine pollution. And finally, on April 12th, to kind of close everything out, we're going to have a hybrid workshop where the topic is going to be on ocean governance and justice. I will just take this moment to add that Michaela, she's going to be dropping some links into chat. One of those links is going to be a registration form for the upcoming 2 workshops. And the other link is going to be a survey where we hope to just collect a bit of data from you guys on your perspective of the topics that we just mentioned. So we're really looking forward and hoping that you all fill those out for us, either after this workshop, if you get some time during, But we really hope that you both fill out the survey and maybe even register for the upcoming events. All right, before I pass it on, I will just give you all another quick rundown of what we're going to be doing today. So we're going to have 4 speakers that are going to be presenting on various topics within the blue economy from their perspectives in the field. And that's going to take us just after 11 o'clock. From there, we're going to move into some breakout groups where we kind of want to get your feedback, your perspective, your thoughts on it. We have a online board. We're going to just ask people just to jot down a couple quick points. And then we're all going to come back together out of those breakout rooms. We're going to meet back up in this main room that we're all sharing right now. And we're just going to share what we kind of all came up with. And then that is pretty much going to take us to the closing remarks of the day. And yeah, that will be our first workshop on Elcoin. So moving into it, I will just add as well, if you have any questions at any time, please drop it in the chat. One of our CYN executive members will definitely try to address it, either by responding to you in chat or maybe we'll even hop on the mic itself. So feel free to ask anything you want, both and any questions that you want to ask to the speakers as well. We're going to allocate a couple minutes at the end of each presentation for a little Q&A. Okay. So with that, I am going to introduce our first speaker, and that is going to be Miss Hannah Locha. Hannah is a research officer at the Institute of Marine Affairs with a specialization in coral reefs, and she's also a member of EcoSeas Caribbean. She has over 5 years experience in coral reef research with a Master of Science in integrated coastal and ocean management. I'd like to add that she's a young woman in STEM, and she is an inspiration for many other young people, especially many other young women who are aspiring to join and excel in this field today. So we're very proud and happy to have her here speaking today, and I'm going to pass it on to her right now. Ms. Lochan, take it
Thank you
away.
so much, Ravish. That was a lovely, lovely introduction. Hi, everyone. Hannah again from the Institute of Marine Affairs. Like Ravish said, I've been working in the field not too long, fairly new, right? New researcher to Trinidad and Tobago's natural resources. I also could represent EcoSeas Caribbean, so we are really fortunate. We're really happy to partner with CYEN to host this workshop. EcoSeas Caribbean has been around for a few years. We have a network of Caribbean youth through 10 different countries in the Caribbean. And we've been doing a lot of work, mainly in a lot of ocean education, advocacy, and just getting people to know about what's going on in their ocean backyards. So we've done beach cleanups, we've done art exhibitions, we have the Tide Talk series where we get professionals to come in and share their knowledge on local and regional natural environments. And we also held snorkel days for youth as well. So for y'all interested, please, we are on Instagram. We are pretty active and we do have a WhatsApp group. We get a lot of our leaders sends through and other members also send through a lot of opportunities, scholarships, internships, that sort of thing. So it's a really great community to be a part of and to volunteer with when we have activities. So I could always share that link with Michaela and she could post it for y'all to join. Let me share my screen. So today, slideshow beginning. So like Ravish mentioned, I have been working at the Institute of Marine Affairs and I have mainly been supporting the biodiversity and coral reef team. So a lot of our work is done in Tobago. That's where we have our coral reefs. We do have reefs in Togo. We do have some communities down the islands, but Tobago is really where we have our well-developed reef structures. So today we're just going to go through, what are some of the threats that the ecosystem is facing and what is some of the work being done to try to mitigate these issues. So before we start, I would just like you to close your eyes I don't know how many of you, if all of you have experienced a coral reef, if you've all been snorkeling. Some of you might not have been to Tobago, that's fine, but you have an idea, and just close your eyes and just picture what you think an ideal coral reef looks like to you. If you go diving, if you go snorkeling, what is it that you want to see? And I think I have a pretty good idea of what you want to see when you go diving and snorkeling. You would want to see huge corals, beautiful corals. Honestly, in Tobago, we have amazing corals. People seem to have a notion that it looks like the Pacific, so it looks like Finding Nemo and lots of different colors. We are a bit different to the Pacific, but we really do have beautiful, massive boulder corals, massive mountainous corals that, they're the size of cars, and some of them are even bigger. So we do have amazing corals in Tobago. And you'd also, I imagine, expect to see some really cool megafauna. You want to see dolphins, you want to see manta rays, you want to see big fish, and all this is fine. And all this is what a healthy reef system, what a healthy ecosystem will look like. So these are actually dolphins that we swam with right off of Mount Irvine. And this is a manta ray that is also at Mount Irvine Wall. So, you get an idea of what the healthy ecosystem looks like. Unfortunately, in the Caribbean, the reality can be a bit different. So the Caribbean has suffered loss of corals over decades to disease, to nutrient pollution, and we've had a lot of degradation of our ecosystem. So the Caribbean is also a hotspot for disease. So we have just many different types of diseases affecting soft corals, affecting hard corals, and all of it has, resulted in an overall loss over time. And some reefs have already gone through their phase shift. This means that the phase shift meaning it is no longer dominated and functionally dominated by hard corals, but you have more turf algae, you have more soft corals that don't provide the same benefits. So for hard corals, some of the benefits include shoreline protection. So we have the Buku Reef right off southwest of Tobago, let me turn on my laser pointer. So we have this reef system here. It's a MPA, should be protected. And you could see the structure and you could see where the waves are breaking. And if these waves were not breaking on the reef, if we did not have Buku Reef and these waves were breaking on Crown Point, on the coastline, it's going to look a lot different. We're going to have a much different system in this area. So you see how important this is in shoreline protection. And we also have the mangrove forest just on the edge as well that would provide a lot of protection to Southwest Tobago. I mean, I know a lot of us probably have gone on the glass bottom boats. Once you go to Tobago, want to go on a Frankie's tour, you want to go to an island pool, you want to snorkel coral gardens, and this is also a major income. And if we didn't have that, if we didn't have Buku Reef, we would have a lot less income in these activities than we do currently. We also have parrotfish. So I know how many of you know parrotfish poop is the white sand that we get that over decades and decades has really built up our beaches. So they also graze on the algae on the reef. So we really need to protect our herbivores, our fish that are on the reef. And overall, just recreation. People love beautiful things. We love to see healthy ecosystems. We love to know that that our ecosystems are safe, that they're protected. And we want to know that, we want to enjoy their beauty. We want people to pay to come to enjoy their beauty. We have people that pay to come diving in Speyside, along the Caribbean coast. And, we really have the responsibility to protect these areas and to maintain the beauty that we have been provided. But all is not great. It's a lot easier to talk about it, a lot easier on paper, but the realities can be different. So one major issue that we have is sediment runoff from land-based sources of pollution. So as you can see here, this is just a picture. So this is taken in Speyside, and you can see after heavy rainfall, what the coastline looks like. So you can see a lot of this runoff. So you can kind of see the margin of the ocean, and you can see the margin of where the sediment and the ocean meet. And if you have this consistently, every time it rains, the river comes down, you have sediment in the water, it can and it does impact on your corals. So if you have corals in this area, or even areas in other parts like Charlottesville, you can have sedimentation on the corals, smothering of the corals. And over time, that can also reduce the health of these corals. We also have loss of coral. So we have overgrowth of other benthic organisms, benthic meaning, what lives on the surface. So you have a lot more turf algae, a lot more soft corals. And what happens is that while, yes, they provide structure, they don't provide the same structure. They're soft, so they don't provide the same protection against waves as hard corals do. Also with soft corals, they kind of waft. And when they waft, they actually allow for sand deposition. And the more sediment and sand you have being deposited is the less clean space you have for corals to grow. And that is a major issue, not just in Tobago, but within the Caribbean. So baby corals are called coral recruits or coral juveniles, and we have very low numbers of juvenile corals throughout the Caribbean. And this is one factor, is that they just might not have the clean space to settle on if the space is overgrown by algae and other soft benthic organisms. We also have coral bleaching that has really within the last few years been a big issue. The Institute of Marine Affairs, so far we have done rapid assessments in 2022, 23, and 24. We will see how it goes this year. We also have disease. So after coral bleaching, you also have the more likelihood of disease outbreaks. And I will discuss more on coral bleaching in a few moments. We also have, I'm sure y'all know this fish. I don't know if many of y'all have ever eaten it, you've ever shot it. We have the lionfish. It's very pretty, but it is a ravenous eater. It eats everything on the reef. IMA also has a lionfish project ongoing just to study, the lionfish populations, and also with the hopes of developing a fish spot fishery for lionfish. And then overfishing of your parrotfish. So we said parrotfish are really important for creating sand and removing algae. And the more you remove these herbivores, is the more algae you're going to have on your reef. And eventually, you're not going to have, like I said, enough clean space on your reef for your corals. So what is a coral? A coral, I actually like, in person a bit, because I can ask you all questions. It's a bit harder to do online. So a coral is an animal. It might look like a rock, it might look like a plant, but it is an animal. It has a mouth, it has a skeleton, it has its little gastrovascular cavity, and on the top of the corals, you have tentacles. And in these tentacles, you have little stinging cells called nematocysts. So if you've ever touched a coral, if you ever touch fire coral, you may get a little sting, and that's actually the coral's way of protecting itself from you. Within the coral tissue, we also have something called zooxanthellae. So zooxanthellae is just tiny, tiny little microalgae that live in the surface of the coral tissue. And this algae actually photosynthesizes. And when it does, we know the products of photosynthesis. And this is what gives the coral a lot of its food. And for the tiny microalgae, the zooxanthellae, also give the coral its color. So as you can see, this is a close-up of an alcone coral on your right-hand side. And you can see the little tentacles. It's out there feeding. And you can see it has a really pretty golden color. That means this is a healthy coral. These zooxanthellae are there. They're happy. They're thriving. And around Tobago, we have coral reefs quite extensively around. We know the Buku Reef area in Southwest Tobago. Then we have reefs coming up the Caribbean coast, and then around on the Atlantic side. So IMA monitors 11 sites around Tobago. The Atlantic Ocean sites, the logistics are a bit harder, so we don't have any sites. We have sites monitoring here, Angel Reef and Blackjack Hole, but we don't have any permanent monitoring sites on this side. But hopefully, in times to come, we'll be able to do more research on the Atlantic side. So I'm in charge with monitoring these coral reefs. So we have been doing monitoring since 2010. So fortunately, in 2010, they monitored coral reefs. So they're looking at hard coral cover, turf algae cover, macroalgae. You just want to know what is growing on the reef. What's going on. So in 2010, the team had monitored, and I just want you to pay attention to the green line, the dark green line here. So you can see the dark green line is hard coral. At 2010, we are at about 30% hard coral cover on average in Tobago. However, after they monitored, in 2010, they had a huge mass bleaching event, and we lost a lot of our corals during this period. And as you can see, between 2010 and 2011, there was a pretty steep drop off in hard coral cover. So we went from 30 to maybe about 15 to 18%. And since then, since 2010, or since that mass bleaching event, we have never actually recovered the hard coral cover that we have. It's stable. There hasn't been any more significant decline, but it is a problem when you see a ecosystem is not repopulating, it's not recovering, it's stable, it's not declining too much, but you want to see some increase in growth. But what we also notice is if you look at the yellow line, we have the turf algae. So turf algae was around 20% before the mass bleaching event. We lost a lot of corals, and then since 2010, turf algae has been the dominant benthic cover on our reefs. So this is what turf algae looks like. It's not quite as expansive as macroalgae, but it's like it kind of looks like grass. It's like a little feathery algae that grows on the reef. And when this is what covers your whole reef, it actually limits, like I said, the coral babies that can grow. It limits the amount of clean structure you have. So that is one of the issues that we have been facing. So I'm sure y'all would have seen, hopefully y'all might have seen our press releases, our social media posts. We did have another mass bleaching event around Tobago last year in 2024. So the team went out and we did assessments in November. So what bleaching is that, like I said, we have the coral, we have the little tiny microalgae, the zooxanthellae that live inside the coral's tissue, and they're happy at cool temperatures at like 27 degrees Celsius, 28 degrees Celsius. The relationship is fine. They're happy. They're photosynthesizing. The coral is getting food. However, as temperatures increase, you start to build the stress. So as the water gets warmer, as climate change increases, we have more higher sea surface temperatures. And with this, especially in the summer months, when it gets warmer, we have stress corals. So what happens is that the algae, when the temperature gets too high, the algae starts to leave the coral. So if you have your main food source being lost, chances are you are going to begin to starve. So that is the beginning of the stress coral of the bleaching. So as these water temperature goes up, algae begins to leave the coral, it's expelled from the coral, and the coral gets more and more stressed, and that's when the coral starts to look more white. So you have peeling, then you have partial bleaching, and then you have full bleaching. So as temperatures continue to increase or temperatures don't go back down, they don't cool, the zooxanthellae is not able to come back into the coral. And what happens is as time goes on, you lose more and more of your zooxanthellae, and then the coral appears completely white. What's important to know is that a coral is not dead. So bleached coral does not mean a dead coral. The tissue is there. It just does not have the zooxanthellae in it to give the coral its food and its color. But what happens is that if this is too prolonged and if it continues for weeks on end, gradually the coral will die. It will suffer and it will basically kind of starve to death. However, if temperatures do go back down, you can have the zooxanthellae, you can have the food source coming back into the coral. So in 2024, we actually had some record-breaking heat stress. The coral bleaching threshold, that's the temperature at which, that is what corals can handle. If it goes too much over that, then they start to get bleached. It's 29.4 degrees. And we went up to way over 30, 32 degrees Celsius at some points last year. And as you can see, the amount of heat that built up. So in 2010, this was the mass bleaching event, and this was 2024. So you could see how much more heat there was built up in our systems in 2024. So in 2023, we did have a bleaching event. We monitored 6 sites. We did see the die-off of some barrel sponges at some reef sites. We saw more disease coming out. This is dark spot disease. We did see bleaching in our brain corals and our massive corals. With bleaching, what happens is that you're under stress. And when you're under stress, the chances of you getting sick, the chances of you getting disease is a lot higher. And also with corals, they have energy. So corals have energy, and they have to decide, what are we putting this energy towards? So if we're stressed, sometimes the energy that would have gone towards reproduction has to be rechanneled and goes into just building the immune response and goes into survival. So you can have higher disease, and you can have lower reproductive capacity of corals after bleaching event because they just don't have the energy. The energy they have is needed to be conserved just to keep these corals alive. In 2024, again, we did see up to more than 50% impact at sites around Tobago. This was actually pretty sad. So in Buku, we did observe that we lost 100% of our staghorn at the sites that we visited. So on the left-hand side, this is the staghorn that we visited in March of 2024. It was healthy, it was beautiful. I had not personally seen staghorn in Tobago before. And we went back in November, and all of the patches were dead. And that was, that was really sad. It was a very sad day. We also visited our different sites, and at Culloden Reef on the right-hand side, you can see what it should look like. It's brown, it's still alive, it's healthy. And we had a lot of huge mountainous star corals that were fully bleached in 2024. At least we have been doing our monitoring in Tobago, and we have been observing recovery of these corals. And then as we go on, we'll have the data and the reports to provide you all with. Apart from coral bleaching, I would just like to mention there's also another looming threat called stony coral tissue loss disease. So it's also called SCTLD. This is a disease that was first observed in Florida. So scientists, reef managers began to see significant, rapid loss of their corals, of their brain corals, of their hard corals. And, it wasn't normal. We have disease. We know the disease exists in the Caribbean, but it's usually slow. We can have a coral that's infected that doesn't die, that survives for years with yellow band disease or dark spot disease. But this one was wiping out corals within days, and that was just not something that was seen before. And gradually they have been doing research, and they believe that it's either a virus working with a bacteria or a bacterial assemblage that is attacking these corals, causing a white tissue loss, a rapid white tissue loss. So in Florida and in Bahamas, since COVID, they have lost millions and millions of their hard corals. We don't have this disease as yet. So we have gotten a grant to build disease preparedness. And this is a picture of me. We were able to go to Colombia to learn how to identify and how to treat the disease. The disease can actually be treated with antibiotics. So that's how they know it's a bacteria. But the only thing is that it can be treated, but the corals can be reinfected. Also, if you have an epidemic stage and you have all of your corals are infected, how do you go about choosing which ones you're going to treat? Because it's pretty impossible to treat everything on your reef. So you have to prioritize sites, you prioritize species, you might prioritize your really big corals that are going to continue producing young coral for you. So this is one of the, I mean, honestly, I'll be honest, it's a worry. We know, so right now, the red dots are the points at which stony coral tissue loss disease exists currently.
Excuse Hannah. Yeah, just a
Yes.
couple minutes left, and I just want to add, if anyone have any questions for Hannah, you could drop it in the chat, and in a couple minutes we will hopefully answer it.
Okay, no problem. Sorry. Okay, let me just rush through. So right now, the closest countries are the ABC Islands and Grenada, where it has officially been recorded. So if you are out diving, if you're out snorkeling, and you see something that doesn't look right, you could always send a picture to us, and we will check it out. So what is being done by IMA? Like I said, we have the long-term coral reef monitoring ongoing. So that's annual. We also, well, now it includes coral bleaching assessments. I mean, we are hoping we don't have to do bleaching assessments for a third year straight, but we will see how this year goes with the heat stress. We also have the Marine Resilience Initiative project. That's actually what I am hired under at Tobago, where we're working towards restoring using sexually based strategies for corals. So on the top here, you could actually see this coral is spawning, meaning it's releasing its gametes, its eggs and its sperm. What happens is that this mixes in the water column. We collect the eggs and sperm, and we actually facilitate the larval process. We actually able to grow the baby corals and then put them back out onto the reef. And like I said, we have the SPORAC project, which is the Specially Protected Areas and Wildlife Regional Activity Center. And we got a small grant just to build awareness on coral disease and our defense against stony coral tissue loss disease. For the Marine Resilience for Marin Tobago project, we also work on the Marine Resilience Network. So this is just empowering the local communities to, engage them in what we're doing and build their capacity so that we can all work together to protect Tobago's resources. So what do we need? We need a lot of things. We need governance. We need the actual enforcement of the legislation. It's no use to us if the legislation is written and it's sitting down in a desk or it's not signed by some legal group. We need it to be created and enacted, and we need them to uphold this responsibility, because there's only so much that, I mean, we can do a lot at an individual level, at a community level, but the government level is really where you need the action to take place. We also want to focus on resilience-based management. We have a lot of disturbances. We have a lot of things like bleaching, like disease that happen. And, you need to incorporate these disturbances into your plan. You need to have, okay, so you need to be able to adapt. If this is happening, what do we do? If this is happening, what do we do? We can't just, follow a strict, rigid code. It needs to be adaptable, and it needs to be resilience-based on how we can always keep the focus on protecting our environment. Having co-management of resources. So if you continue to engage more the communities in managing their backyards and but really feeling responsibility for their areas. We have the success story of the leatherback turtles in Northeast Trinidad. And you empower these people to really care about these animals and to understand, what you can get from them being alive rather than dead. And you can, really build the community spirit, and it gets people to really understand the importance of the environment and our resources. We need sustainable financing. A lot of projects come from international funding, but we need it to be at our government. We need it included. We need protection of our environmental resources included in our plans. And of course, what we can do is stewardship, advocacy, and awareness. That's educate yourself, continue to educate other people, join groups, volunteer, learn new things, and you really can have a positive impact, even if it's not at a national level, even if it's community level, or even influencing a group of friends, all of it matters. Because according to Babadoom, in the end, we will conserve what we love. We will love what we understand, and we will understand what we are taught. So we have the responsibility to keep learning and to keep teaching others, to understand the importance and the value of our environment, and that we will eventually grow to love and conserve our beautiful resources. So yeah, that's it from me. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for that, Hannah. Incredibly informative presentation. Uh, so yeah, again, we just want to say thank you. If anyone has any questions for you, could drop it in chat. Maybe Hannah, if you could type out a response. Yeah, I see one question there from Zaki Aparicio.
Volunteering opportunities. Yeah, so we have different projects at the IMA. For the Mar and Tobago project that I am involved in, yes, we do. So we work mainly in Tobago. We do coral and seagrass restoration, and we do hope to have volunteer opportunities and hope to advertise this as the time comes. So I could always reach out to Michaela, and we can always add CYEN to our network, and we'll just keep you all updated of any opportunities.
Yeah, thank you. And I saw another question from Seth, but I believe Michaela would have dropped a link in chat to EcoSeas. So if you want to get involved, you want to stay up to date with what's happening over at EcoSeas, please follow that link, check them out. And I'm sure you can maybe even get into contact with Hannah there too. I saw another question from Seth, and I see Michaela hand raised, maybe. No?
No, my hand isn't raised. But it would be lovely if we don't have time for questions, if we can move on to the next presenter. And yeah, if anything, Hannah can add in the chat if possible.
Okay. Yep. All right. So thank you very much, Hannah. Yeah. Any questions? Drop it in chat. She'll type out a response, and we'll move straight into our next presenter, and he's going to be Mr. Alyoshka Watke, and he is the CEO of the yeah. He is the CEO of the Environmental Research Institute of Charlottesville. And a little bit more about him. He's a senior expert with broad experience in Caribbean, small island, and developing states, and with a main technical expertise in facilitating innovative stakeholder collaborations regarding sustainable energy, sustainable green and blue economy, responsible tourism, protected area management, environmental resource management, marine and terrestrial conservation, and CSO governance and capacity building. He's a founding director of the Northeast Tobago's most outstanding ENGO, the Environmental Research Institute of Charlottesville, and he has been the project lead in award-winning interventions. Mr. Watke has served as a team lead for a 3-year EU-funded community-based eco-agro-tourism project in St. Lucia, and has drafted the technical documents for the Northeast Tobago's successful nomination as a UNESCO Man and the Biosphere Reserve. So with that, I'm going to pass you on to Mr. Watke. Please take it away.
Wonderful. Good morning, everybody. And thank you for inviting me. And thank you for you guys participating in this informative session, especially for young people. I was tasked to inform you a little bit more about what ERIC is doing, how we see our mandate. I was supposed to talk a little bit about the Biosphere Reserve that was just mentioned, and then having a quick excursion into fisheries, overfishing issues, and what are the gaps and challenges, and how young people can participate. And I'm familiar with CYN, obviously, from my role as the former chairman of COPE, the Council of Presidents of the Environment. So we had some good interactions before. All right, so what is the Environment Research Institute in Charlottesville? It was formed 12 years ago regarding from a panel of experts that have worked in many various Caribbean small island states and in Northeast Tobago in the wake of a project that some of you might know. That was the IFPAM project. That was the Improved Forest and Protected Area Management project in Trinidad and Tobago, where the FAO and the United Nations assisted in restructuring the governance and strengthening our protected areas in Trinidad and Tobago, and two of those areas were the Main Forest Reserve and the planned marine protected area in Northeast Tobago. So while we have been engaged as a group in Northeast Tobago for quite a while, we had a series of fortunate circumstances. We were able to rent an old dive shop, set up our facility. We got support from small grants program, and we were able to start mainly with the marine focused themes on marine conservation. But ARIC sees itself as much broader. In principle, while the directors of ARIC and most of the staff are natural scientists, we have learned that the social sciences are as important for conservation and for stakeholder engagement as the natural sciences. Practical conservation on the ground only functions when we understand the different strata of the stakeholders, understand the issues, and then provide solutions that are stakeholder oriented. And if I'm saying stakeholder oriented, I'm seeing nature, I'm seeing animals, plants, any organisms as stakeholders as important as humans. So we have to find development solutions to share challenges for all those stakeholders. So what we do at ARIC really, we work at different levels. So the base level, the foundation is more or less for us to understand the environment in which we are working on. So that means we work on scientific methods to measure biodiversity, ecosystem health, I would rather say, and try to assess how healthy is the forest, how healthy are the reefs, how healthy is our shark population, how healthy is our turtle populations. All these are programs where we engage in monitoring in a continuous basis, so we get data long term. Regarding the reef monitoring, obviously we have overlaps there with the IMA, and at the same time we are monitoring as well the blue, green, and purple, the creative economies in Northeast Tobago. So we are trying to assess what is it that drives a sustainable economy, or could drive a sustainable economy here. Having said this, it is we will not be able to maintain ecosystem integrity in Northeast Tobago, and why I'm speaking specifically about Northeast Tobago because ARIC has a mandate specifically to Northeast Tobago. We only operate with some very small exemptions in Northeast Tobago. And conservation, ecosystem restoration, biodiversity, ecosystem health, ecosystem services maintenance can only happen when at the same time the communities, the people that live here, are able to develop in a sustainable way. And we have to find solutions that address both issues. So we are trying to find ways how we can, on one hand, make people happier and make the environment happier, if you want to say it like this. So in order to do this, the first step that we need to do is understand our stakeholders. We have to understand the people, we have to understand the economy, we have to understand reef health and conservation. The second step is that we have to, that we would like to, are communicating about it. And the question is, how do you communicate in rural areas such as Northeast Tobago, and who are the listeners? And there are two aspects that are very important. One is that for the target groups that we were trying to reach, highly elaborate, difficult, long texts scientific publications, etc., are not the right communication tool. We have to find communication ways how we can reach people through their preferred methods of communicating, and often this is via social media, short messages, or by personal conversations. And that is something that we are increasingly applying to our communication strategies, using shorts, using visual media, and specifically having our community-based field technicians, which are paid part-time employees of ERIC that are coming from the surrounding communities to talk about with their peers about issues that are of importance for their livelihoods as well as for the environment. So communication turns out to be a very significant tool in order to bring points across and make people understand the difficulties that they face much better. But also that the communication to, for example, political decision makers is has to be well thought of. Scientists hardly speak the language of fishermen and hardly speak the language of politicians, but scientists have the task to adapt their language and their communication tools in such a way that we can reach them, and we have to know how we reach politicians, how we reach decision makers, and how we can influence and make them understand that some of the issues that we are facing are very critical, because ecosystems are not, they can take stress for a very long time, but then they can switch into a very bad state very, very rapidly and quickly and go beyond recovery. And that is definitely what we have to avoid. So having said this, our outreach program, again, through our community-based field technicians, through our school outreach programs, talking to business people, talking to dive shops, talking to tourism operators, talking to farmers, talking to fishermen. That is how we try to communicate about what we see through our monitoring. The next step is really trying to be an incubator for innovative business models. So we're trying to find what is called regenerative conservation activities. Regenerative conservation and economic activities are those that are on one hand creating economic benefits, and on the other hand creating as well conservation benefits. A typical example would be tourists are coming to observe or for turtle watching, and they're paying for it, and that is the reason why tour guides and turtle groups have the possibility to go to beaches in the night and deter poachers. The presence of tourists and the presence of local turtle groups on the beach every night that they are there deters a poacher. So it's a tourism activity that on one hand can activate economic activities, on the other hand is protecting the turtles. Similar things would be if tourism would be involved in beach cleanups, or if we at ERIC, for example, involving tourists in collecting data on forest health, or helping us with our coral restoration programs. So people are actually willing and to pay to be part of an activity that helps ecosystem restoration. So this is our yacht mooring program is similar, where we stopped more or less the anchoring in Pirates Bay in Charlottesville, the wild anchoring on the reefs and on seagrass that was formerly there. And by installing mooring buoys, the yachts now have a safe anchor. And at the same time, we can create income that we share with the community for social activities and for conservation activities. So these are some of the solutions, and there are many more to find how activities could help creating income and at the same time assist with conservation efforts. So we are trying to create examples of these things so people can see and experience how this can work, and then they could apply it in other places and do similar things. So we see ourselves as a role model for those kind of activities, and we share this obviously in Northeast Tobago, but through our outreach program, even in the wider Caribbean region and globally actually. Having said this, the fourth aspect that ERIC is doing is we are education and educational tourism facility. So we are facilitating student and university groups from mainly Europe and in Northern America to come here and do research, do expeditions, seminars, workshops with us between a week and 2 weeks. That made to Charlottesville one of the hubs for educational tourism in Trinidad and Tobago. I'm not too sure whether there's somewhere else where so many student groups come every year and contribute significantly to the income of a small community in Charlottesville, but also contribute to the existence of ERIC and contribute to our conservation activities. Last but not least, we are acting as technical advisors to the Tobago House of Assembly and the government of Trinidad and Tobago, and that is mainly, as was mentioned before, regarding the Biosphere Reserve, the UNESCO Biosphere Reserve. And I would like to ask Michaela now if she could please put up the map. So on a very short introduction for those who are not familiar with it, Northeast Tobago is a UNESCO Man in the Biosphere Reserve. It's a bit different from a World Heritage Site. A World Heritage Site is something for more conserving things like an old church. Man in the Biosphere Reserve is a reserve that is created to provide examples for the interaction between mankind and the environment, positive interaction. It's supposed to be a learning site where solutions can be found, and you can see everything in color here is the Biosphere Reserve. So that means that more than half of Tobago is actually a UNESCO Biosphere Reserve. This does not make any legal change, doesn't cause any legal changes, so there's no additional law, but it allows to, to focus sustainable development efforts and funders in this area. So it became an attractive tool for international funding agencies to focus their efforts on Northeast Tobago. This is one of the largest marine biosphere reserves globally, because biosphere reserves are normally more terrestrial. We have another one in St. Andres in the Caribbean that is much larger than ours, but for the Caribbean, that is the second largest. So that is also the waters of the plant marine protected area in Tobago. That was planned 3 or 4 times, but always failed to be passed in Parliament, unfortunately. Hopefully we forget the old failures and will try to have a new approach to this in the next 2 or 3 years. You can see the core area, which are the legally protected areas. These are the dark green areas, Mainridge, St. Giles and Little Tobago. And then the blue and lesser green, the darker green area, these are the buffer zones. So these are the zones between the legally protected areas and the community areas, and the community areas are the orange areas. So this was, we had 2 years, we were charged by government to write a justification and for this and submit it to the UNESCO, which we did in 2019. In 2020, Northeast Tobago was declared a biosphere reserve since then. And we have now almost finalized the management plan for it, and the structure that will later in the future carry this biosphere reserve to full implementation, which is the Tobago Biosphere Management Alliance, which is an existing organization on paper only at the moment. It has to be injected with some funding from the government, and hopefully in next year's Tobago plea to the national government to put some money towards it. This will not be rejected again, and hopefully in September we get some funding to implement this. Thank you, Michaela. Right, so regarding marine, so the importance of the Northeast Tobago marine managed biosphere reserve cannot be underestimated, because it includes all those coral reefs that Hannah was speaking about. It includes open ocean, it includes some small, very small wetlands, it includes those very important seabird areas of Little Tobago and St. Giles. By the way, Hannah's map that you saw when in the map that was showing the coral reefs, she showed us an area where they do less monitoring from Roxborough down, and that area, actually those corals are already not existing anymore. I'm getting a reminder to finish just now. I want to very quickly speak about overfishing. Overfishing in the marine, in the biosphere reserve, is mainly an issue related to the lack of knowledge of fishermen. They are not aware that undiscriminated fishing, that means fishing that is not restricted regarding time and space and gear, leads to a decline in fish stock. And we have seen in Northeast Tobago a decline in fish stock and a change of fish size over the years. Fishermen are very clear that the fishing effort, that means the time and money they have to invest to catch a certain stock amount of fish, has significantly increased. What was easier 10, 15 years ago is becoming harder and harder. They have to go further out, they use more gas, it's getting more dangerous. So we have to really think about how we can address those issues. We're getting hopefully a new fisheries bill that is in draft since the last 10 years that allows now to manage threatened fish stock a bit better. But the first most important aspect would be to reach fishermen, possibly it's not really educated, reach fishermen and allow them to understand what is the consequence out of wrong fishing techniques, sites and time. In some cases in the Caribbean that has happened, but unfortunately that happens mainly when the fish stocks collapse, and then fishermen start to rethink, or fisher folk start to rethink. Gaps and challenges, two more sentences on this, Michaela, please, is, and it directly connects, it's really the direct interaction with those stakeholders that don't have the knowledge. And if I think about young people, how they could contribute, and the next speaker, Seth, for example, I'm very familiar with him, is an outstanding young conservationist that we have worked with, or continue working with, is how can we communicate it? And by Seth talking to people in Tobago, by young people talking to peers, talking to stakeholders, and asking them questions that makes those stakeholders think, I think is very important, that you as young conservationists learn to use or engage in using your communication skills in order to reach those people that do not have the appropriate either knowledge, attitude or practice in order to sustain their livelihoods and in order to sustain ecological integrity. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Mr. Watke. Extremely insightful presentation. I think there's a lot of great work happening by the Environmental Research Institute at Charleville, we're gonna have a link in chat where you guys can check them out, follow up, keep up to date with all that's happening over there. And if I could just say, I think it's really great that you all, took the work to put Tobago on the map as far as the UNESCO Man and Biosphere Reserves are concerned. I think that's incredible. And yeah, so far it seems a lot of great things happening in and around Tobago with regards to the climate and environmental space. So thank you very much for that.
You're most welcome.
If anyone has any questions for him, you can drop it in chat. I believe Mr. Watke mentioned he may not be able to stay for the entire session. So if you do have any questions, you could reach out through the link in chat as well, and that will get pushed on to the area, to the Institute. Okay. So we're running a bit short on time, so we're just gonna move on to the other two speakers immediately. And our next speaker is going to be Mr. Seth Aki. And I'm just asking for the next two speakers if you can maybe just try to keep the presentations a bit short, maybe 10 minutes, 15 minutes if you have to. But yeah, next we have another representative from Tobago. This is Mr. Seth Aki. He's a young Tobagonian marine scientist who demonstrates a profound commitment to the environmental conservation efforts. He's had a unique academic journey coupled with extensive community engagement, all of which fuels his drive to protect Tobago's coastal resources. Currently, he's pursuing an MPhil in marine sciences, and he blends his scientific expertise with community-based approaches, aiming for sustainable marine management here in the Caribbean. With that, I'm going to pass you on to Mr. Seth Aki. Floor is yours.
Okay, thank you for the amazing introduction. So when Michaela asked me to do this presentation, she would have asked me to tell it from a more storytelling perspective rather than as a scientist. So I had to take off my scientist hat and put on my storytelling hat. So bear with me for a second. So this is my perspective on marine biodiversity and overfishing. So she asked me to start by introducing myself. So what is Asset? Sometimes I wonder the same thing too. So Asset is somebody who comes from this small island here in the Caribbean. And this is just a little run through of how my journey to marine science would have started. Started with fishing, and then I would have engaged in the Season and Science program with the Book Reef Trust. And around that time, I finished sixth form and got scuba certified. I started a BSc in Coastal and Ocean Management back in 2020. I volunteered with the Book Reef Trust, and from that, I had a bit of a quiet period in my life. And in 2023, that is when things really started taking off. I got the opportunity to intern with National Geographic and TNC. And I became a fisheries assistant with the Division of Food Security, Marine Resources and Fisheries. And also got another opportunity to intern, do a fellowship with National Geographic and Planetary Imagined in 2024. And right now I am with the Tobago Emergency Management Agency as a planning assistant. So this is just a few of the places that are near and dear to my heart, my home in Scarborough. The Book Reef, where I would have done a lot of my research. Petit True Lagoon by Magdalena, where I would have also done a lot of my advocacy work and storytelling. And also Charlottesville, where I would have learned a lot about diving and that side of marine science from Mr. Watke, and right now, Tima, where I currently work. So what are some of the positive impacts of fisheries from my experiences? It contributes to the food security of Tobago. It has significant economic contribution. You know, we trade a lot of value-added products from fisheries. There's a lot of cultural significance. A lot of the villages in Tobago are traditional fishing villages, and it's not only a way to make money, but it's also deeply ingrained in the culture of the village. So you have a lot of fisherman fetes and that kind of thing. It also supports tourism. A lot of tourists come here specifically to go on fishing tours, and it allows for more sustainable communities here in Tobago. So some of the challenges that we face in Tobago with fishing, the fishing industry in general, is overfishing and stock depletion. We have a lot of bycatch and habitat destruction in a bit of a lesser extent. We also have pollution from fishing activities. Ghost nets is a big problem. Lost fishing lines, sometimes, it have a lot of bycatch. They just leave the fish on the beach to rotten. That is a big issue. And limited resources for sustainable management. We have limited resources in the form of data and personnel to properly manage fisheries, and even the budgetary allocations to properly manage the fishing industry. So moving on to the main types of ecosystems we have here in Tobago that feeds the fisheries. So we have coral reefs, seagrass beds, mangroves, the open ocean, both the pelagic and the coastal waters, the benthic zone, coastal marshlands, and tide pools. So these are some of the more locally exploited fish species. So you have your kingfish, dolphin, the tuna species, multiple species, the snappers, the sharks, flying fish, etc. So this is a presentation that I would have done with the fisheries officer when I was at fisheries. So this is looking at some of the traditional fishing methods that I would have seen them use and even participated in my time in fisheries. So first you have the trolling method. No, it's not a troll, a fantasy troll going out to sea and catching fish. It's actually dragging a line behind a boat to attract predatory fish. So these are some of the fish that you catch from trolling. You have your barracuda, snappers, kingfish, the tuna species, bonito, marlin, etc. You also have banking, and it's not putting fish in the bank. It is parking the boat and deploying lines from the boats to catch fish. These are some of the species that you catch from banking. You have fish aggregating devices, what they call FADs. And these are essentially artificial ecosystems that they set up in the middle of the ocean to attract smaller fish, and these smaller fish attract bigger fish. So this is a video of a FAD, which is essentially just some coconut branches strapped together. And as you can see, it has a lot of small flying fish coming, and you will see them start spawning, releasing eggs and that sort of thing. And all this movement and a lot of small fish would attract bigger predatory fish that will come to eat it. And, you could throw a line in the water, you could start spearfishing around this FAD. So another method that we use is palang, which is essentially a long line with many different hooks on it. You have this spearfishing method where you literally just jump out of a boat with a spear gun and you shoot exactly the fish that you want. You get to choose the fish. So this is one of the most selective and most eco-friendly methods of fishing that we use here in Tobago. In the interest of time, I wouldn't show you the full video, but he did shoot a fish. So this is one of the more traditional fishing methods we have here in Tobago, which is beach seining, where a big net is dragged out to sea by boats. And these boats then pull the net back in, and the two ends of the net attached to ropes are then held by villagers, two sets of villagers on either side, and they pull in the net, and whatever fish is within the net at the time gets pulled in. So it has a lot of bycatch, as you would have seen. They're just throwing out puffer fish. They threw out a stingray before, but not all fish species are lucky enough to survive being caught in a scene. So it's a bit more of a traditional Tobago method, but a bit less sustainable. So you also have fish pots and cast nets and alaviv, which is live bait. So based on my observations, this is some observations that I would have made on the state of fisheries in Tobago. So there is overfishing of keystone species. So, when you're talking to local divers, one of the main things that you notice is that there's a severe lack of sharks in Tobago Reef. It's very rare to see a shark, which is very bad because they are essential to reef ecosystem. There are a lot of bycatch and habitat damage, as would have been mentioned earlier. Depletion of commercially important species. So, for example, I would have seen a lot of small tuna being caught in these seine nets. And the problem with that is that tuna is used as a value-added product. They will cut a little piece of the tuna off, smoke it with herbs and spices here in Tobago, and sell, just a little piece of tuna for $50. That is a value-added product that is exported. So when you catch all the small ones in the sea net, that is a big problem. And of course, lack of comprehensive data on fish species and of the impact that the fisheries industry has on the fish stocks that we have here in Tobago. So these are some of the challenges that we have, why our fisheries aren't really being sustainably managed, just building off of what Mr. Alyosha would have said earlier. So there's data scarcity. The reality is that we see the fish stocks depleting just by going out and monitoring them, our observation over time, but we don't know how much and by what and to what extent. We know there is overfishing and a lot of bycatch and habitat damage. And with all places around the world, there is the fishing industry is affected by climate vulnerability and resource constraints. So just to put things in the international context, over 34% of the fish stocks around the world has been depleted based on research done. Up to 25 million tons of fish is lost just due to bycatch alone. There are methods like trawling that destroy habitats, which is essentially massive nets that is just being dragged across the seafloor. And, the climate change, it impacts everyone and everywhere. So these are some of the tools that I think could be used to manage, fisheries. Sorry, I would have clicked off of my presentation for some. Okay, back to it now. So you have monitoring. So you use different tools, sensors, cameras, that sort of thing to manage the fish stock. So when you know how much fish you actually have from the monitoring, you do a stock assessment, the age, the gender, how much fish that are being caught that hasn't reproduced yet. And then you put it into something like a FishPath tool that was created by TNC that takes the data that you have and suggests decision-making steps that you could take to properly manage your fisheries. And then you could set up marine protected areas and catch quotas and size limits, times that the fishermen able to fish at certain places. So the whole point is you need to first collect the data and then make the laws based on the data. So moving forward, I would like to see improved data collection, as I would have mentioned, ecosystem-focused approach. So you focus on protecting the ecosystem first, and then you focus on the fisheries industry, because if there's no ecosystem, there's no fisheries. Enforcement of rules and legislation, and even like updating of the legislation that already exists. Like the fisheries bill that was recently proposed. Then I would like to see community engagement. You empower community members, give them the ability to arrest people, the local fishermen, give them the ability to, place people under citizens arrest and give them the resources that they need to do that when they see, people breaking laws that could damage the environment. And then you could start adapting the fisheries industry to the climate change. So to end off, I would just remind you to be the change that you would like to see in the world. And there's just a few links that you could check out to get more information on what I would have presented on. Any questions, comments, concerns, feedback?
Thank you so much, Seth. I do see we have one question in the chat from Lashonda. Do you think local fishermen or communities will abide by seasonal fishing laws if they were enforced to reduce overfishing?
I think that there will be a lot of pushback and a lot a lot of pushback at first. They wouldn't want to abide by it. So they need to have very strict enforcement of these laws for like the first 5 years. And then when the fishermen realize that they're spending less money and gas to go further out to sea, you know, they're spending less time at sea to catch more fish, they would see the benefit of it and they themselves will pick it up. But I don't think they would abide by it and they would support it at first, because you know what we realize is that humans have a very short track way of thinking. You know, I need resources right now, I need money to send my children to school now, so I would just try to take as much as I could get to, you know, provide for the needs that I have now and worry about later when later comes.
Wow, great answer. Lashonda, yeah, incredible answer. But said generally, I just want to say thank you for that wonderful presentation. I will say I think it's a good mix of both the science and the storytelling. And some really unique perspectives in those videos and pictures from kind of behind the scenes of what the fishermen that feed a lot of the country kind of experience. So thank you very much for that.
Yes, no problem.
Okay. And you can maybe feel free to drop some links to yourself, to the work that you do in chat. So people could reach out to you, maybe follow up with other questions if they have. And I am going to now move straight into our last but not least, our final presenter. And she's going to be Miss Tyann Henry. Tyann is a marine biologist who currently holds the position of Regional Coordinator of the Fisheries Transparency Initiative here in the Caribbean. She graduated from the University of the West Indies with a bachelor's degree in marine biology, and then graduated with a Master's of Science from the University of Trinidad and Tobago. She is also a PADI certified rescue diver, as well as a PADI certified primary and secondary care and first aid responder. She's done a lot of great work in the coastal and coral space, and we're very pleased to have her here as our final presenter. Ms. Henry, it's all yours.
Thanks so much, Ravish. Hi to everyone. Thrilled to be here. And I am the regional coordinator for the Fisheries Transparency Initiative at the moment. So today, I just want to share a little bit about overfishing in the Caribbean and the role of fisheries transparency in sustainable management. Sorry, does moving this come up on your screen as well? I've been moving my tab around.
No, we're only seeing the opening slide for the presentation.
Perfect. Okay. All right. So UN Sustainable Development Goal 14, which pertains to life below water, encourages us to maintain the sustainable use of our marine resources, which, when you think about it, is a very tricky balancing act. We're safeguarding the livelihoods of those involved in the fisheries market, not to mention ensuring food security for populations, while also in the same breath, also aiming to conserve these same marine resources for future generations. It is a difficult line to toe when it comes to sustainable management of any natural resource, let alone managing what goes on in our oceans. Some of the key challenges faced in conducting ocean conservation efforts include climate change, pollution, and overexploitation. The latter being the focus of the Fisheries Transparency Initiative. And in keeping with the interests of today's theme, we'll focus on overexploitation of fisheries resources. So, can anybody tell us in short what overfishing is? And just because of time, rather than raising your hand, I'll ask if anybody could just type their response in the chat box. So, in a nutshell, it's taking too many fish from the ocean at a faster rate than they can reproduce. And of course, if current stocks aren't given opportunity to reproduce before being harvested, populations will begin to decline over time. So what are some of the causes or actions that can lead to overfishing? Anyone wants to take a stab? Sorry, I can't see the box. Did we get any responses?
Yes, people are saying Overfishing is taking more than you need, taking more fish than they can replenish, the overtaking of too many fish, and somebody said, need money.
Okay, great. So some of the causes that that lead to that would be illegal fishing, having a lack of regulations and monitoring, as Seth mentioned, and of course, having an increased demand for the supply of whatever marine products are at hand. And we'll talk a little bit more on this in a minute. So just based on the responses you gave for overfishing, I think we can already identify that most people here see fisheries as a key commodity that requires suitable regulation and management to allow sustainability, especially in the case of small island developing states like ours in the Caribbean region that would rely heavily on our marine products. However, as is always the case, we often have a lot of major drivers of overexploitation that can impede or get in the way of these efforts made towards sustainability, whether it is increased demand, corruption, illegal unregulated fishing, and we do need to have some sort of delegation of authority for management of these key resources. So just to paint a broad stroke picture of what is going on in the Caribbean region at the moment. At present, based on FAO reporting, about 60% of fisheries within the Caribbean region are now being overexploited. And that is a 2020 citation. So it's probably a lot more now. And I'm sure we can all think of at least one example where we see it firsthand. Whether it's the limited availability of local catch for purchase this Lenten season at skyrocketed prices, whether it is seeing reports or even personal observation of smaller densities and less diversity of fish species when you're out at sea, it really is there in our faces. An interrelated issue of climate change is also a large factor affecting fish populations, as with loss of reefs to bleaching with rising sea temperatures, we tend to lose a lot of habitat area. Caribbean reefs make up over 10% of the world's reefs and support about 1,400 different species of fish and marine mammals. With declining coral cover over the years due to climate impacts, we're seeing similar trends of declines in fish production, threatening both job availability in the sector and food availability. Local fisheries provide a significant percentage of food for local people in the region, especially when it comes to coastal and island communities. And alongside fisheries, tourism also plays a large role in our Caribbean economies. And that relies heavily on our pristine beaches, our coral reefs, and of course, recreational marine activities. So one key example would be in terms of tourism. Antigua and Barbuda's GDP in 2022 actually comprised over 90% of tourism. So the big question is really, what happens if our fish disappear? So y'all could start typing in the meantime in the chat. But before I fully throw it out to you, I need to ask quickly if anyone can identify the species of fish in the picture. Feel free to just unmute and throw your answer. I'll give you a minute.
Nassau group, or is it?
Great. Thank you. I'm not sure who that was, but thank you. So this is the Nassau grouper, which has experienced significant population declines across the Caribbean, mainly due to overfishing, especially targeting their predictable spawning aggregations. So these aggregations where thousands of groupers usually gather to spawn when they are highly vulnerable to exploitation, leading to drastic reductions in numbers. For instance, in the Bahamas, where this iconic species coined its name, landings have decreased by 86% over 2 decades, reflecting a severe decline in abundance. So recognizing the severity of this situation, the IUCN, or the International Union for Conservation of Nature, has listed the Nassau grouper as critically endangered, indicating that it faces an extremely high risk of extinction in the wild. Conservation efforts, including seasonal fishing closures and protection of spawning sites have been implemented in various regions to aid in recovery of the species. For example, on a regional basis, the US Virgin Islands actually implemented such measures, and that has led to a steady increase of their Nassau grouper populations, with more than 1,000 individuals being counted during their 2024 spawning season. But unfortunately, even with these localized successes, the overall population trend is still concerning, making it necessary for continued and coordinated conservation actions across the Caribbean to prevent extinction of this iconic fish. So back to the question at hand. What happens if our fish disappear? Did we get any responses in the chat?
Yes, they said food chains will be disrupted as well as climate change will increase if all the fish disappears.
So that is one of them. And we already touched on the first two in the last slide, which would be, we would see our tourism being impacted and loss of livelihoods, loss of jobs in the fishery sector. So we'll have loss of biodiversity and abundance of fish species will shift the delicate balance of our marine ecosystems, throwing off symbiotic relationships and food webs, which is correct, as they said. And of course, loss of fish for harvesting translates to lack of food security for some of our SIDs. And that is a crucial impact that COVID has made painfully clear of the need for us to address for the immediate needs of populations in times of crisis. So after all this discussion on how severely overfishing can impact us, why does overfishing happen to begin with? Especially when we have national authorities charged with managing these resources. So I think Seth gave an excellent overview of that situation in his presentation. And personally, having previously worn the hat of those authorities responsible for management of fisheries as well, my diplomatic answer to that is that a lot of times in seeking to achieve sustainable management of fisheries, we have a lot of major drivers of overexploitation that get in the way of the efforts being made towards sustainability. And these are some of the examples here, whether it is IUU fishing, a lack of enforcement, or poor fisheries data. And it is really only so much that the policies in place can do. But if we don't have the capacity at hand at some stage in management, whether it is to create and implement these policies and laws, whether it's lack of capacity for enforcing the laws, or even in terms of obtaining funding to conduct effective monitoring and evaluation of resources, we often end up with cracks in the overarching management plans. And I am of the strong belief that transparency in the fisheries sector can be an effective tool in addressing several of these challenges. Having a lack of basic transparency can be seen as an underlying facilitator of all the negative aspects highlighted for the global fishery sector. So the global challenge of attaining sustainable fisheries can be more effectively approached through collaborative partnerships with multiple actors. And this is where the Fisheries Transparency Initiative, or the FITI, comes in. Collective action is our foundation, and we are a global multi-stakeholder partnership that supports coastal countries and small island developing states in increasing the accessibility, credibility, and usability of marine fisheries management information. So when I say that fisheries transparency can be a solution to these drivers of overexploitation, I'm referring to providing availability of fisheries information. In seeking to sustainably manage fisheries, we always have critical questions that need to be answered to effectively manage the resource. And these would include questions like, how is the fishery sector being regulated? How much fish is being caught in our waters? What is the health of our fish stocks? How much do we eat from our fisheries resources? Who is allowed in our waters and what activities take place? And of course, how is our government supporting the fishery sector? And in the case of addressing these fundamental questions, a lot of times what we don't know can hurt us. A lack of data or knowledge gaps in these areas impact national authorities' abilities to make best decisions based on the available evidence. It can even marginalize certain subgroups or subsectors within the fisheries and worse yet, undervalue the entire contribution of the sector. So creating transparency in fisheries provides open access to data about who fishes, where, and how much they're taking out of the waters. It helps us track illegal fishing and ensures sustainable catch limits. And it even allows youth and communities to advocate for better policies. And on that note, I'm also happy to share that the Fisheries Transparency Initiative is currently expanding outreach to the Caribbean and Pacific regions. And we actually provide countries with an internationally recognized framework based on 12 key areas of marine fisheries management, which we've coined the FITI standard. And it actually provides governments a tool in defining what sort of information should be made publicly available, whether it's online or elsewhere. In addition to this, in the process of working with countries to improve their fishery sectors, we don't simply work with the government, but rather we also seek to implement a collaborative approach where we establish national multi-stakeholder groups per country, inclusive of and equally represented by government, academia, business, and civil society. So enhancing, no problem, almost there. Enhancing transparency in fisheries management appeals to all stakeholders that can appreciate the enormous value of marine fisheries, whether that relates to food and nutrition, security, employment, the value of national economies, or the importance of fishing. And just to give some of the real life examples of transparency on a regional level, in Barbados, we have an effective setup of vessel monitoring systems on their fishing fleets to monitor activities at sea. They've already successfully done it for voluntary vessels at sea, and right now they're in the process of seeking to do it at a large-scale level for their fishery sector or vessel. And in terms of fisheries management plans, countries like Belize and Jamaica continue to make strides in improving transparency over time. Jamaica is even now serving as the region's Blue Justice Hub, which is a step in the right direction for the entire region. And some of the benefits for fisheries transparency are listed in the ship's wheel towards sustainable fisheries. So while you guys read through, I'll list some of the other benefits of implementing fisheries transparency as a means of mitigating overfishing. We can stop illegal fishing. If eyes are on him, a thief is likely to steal. But what about a spotlight? The eyes of enforcement can't always remain open 24/7, as we're all aware of. But creating the transparency of notifying the public of acts of theft or illicit activities may spark awareness at sea, or even bring forward witnesses from those illicit activities. We can also protect fish stocks for future generations. Having public availability of regulations and greater efforts for public dialogue on the topic can improve awareness of the need for these regulations and therefore improve adherence. We can create fairer opportunities for local fishers, having them being aware of the markets and quotas in place, whether we have industrial distribution of fisheries quotas to different entities. With transparency involved, everyone has a fair chance at getting a piece of the pie. And finally, we can encourage sustainable seafood consumption in allowing the public the opportunity of seeing or knowing where their catch is coming from and the methods of catch used in harvesting these products being purchased. It is a step in the right direction to empower them to actually choose the sustainable option. So what you can do is, while you're out shopping, check for your eco labels. Always aim to get the sustainable option. Support local fishers and responsible fishing policies. Use apps like the Seafood Watch, which is a seafood advisory list that influenced similar programs around the world. And of course, raise awareness through social media and activism. So continue to play your part in protecting our oceans, and always remember that small actions can have big impacts. We need our young people to speak up and advocate for our environments as they step into different roles in the marine sphere. So whether your goal is to be an oceanographer, a ship's captain, an ecologist, whatever it is, continue to use your voice on behalf of the environment and our natural resources.